So the CEO, or the finance director, and the CEO have that different view. The CFO was saying, well, one's way too expensive. And can we put an element at risk? So take some half a day rate and say, well, if you take out, this 40% of cost, they want to close down all the call centers, then we will pay you, your normal rate. So it's quite an innovative idea, and we have done that in the past.
Yeah, we use that with some consultants actually, which worked very well at the beginning.
Yeah, and why not? Why not? But quite rightly, that insurance said, well, there's bad cost as well to cut. And I could, if I was somebody else, just easily hit that target. But you're going to have long-term problems. You're going to lose contracts. You've got this huge global contract with pharmaceutical companies. More people might go than you expect. You're sitting in head office. You don't know quite what's going on the ground. So I'm not. I know the philosophy, and maybe we can talk about it again in 4 weeks' time. Once I've done a lot of work, I'm really in. Even a couple of weeks in. So I thought that was quite interesting conversation about. It kind of touches on the point about good cuts, bad cuts, good change, bad change. And we also did the exercise. We also did it around sale. The exercise where we just asked for examples, or tangible examples of cost reduction. We did that for sales growth as well. Sometime later. And again, that was really interesting to say how restructuring a commercial team led to X, Y, and Z. And I guess it's only at the end of the day it was quite straightforward exercises. There are two ways to generate profit, and yes, we looked at both sides of the equation.
More money or cut costs or both. Can I just say that I think one of the things I didn't say was just we did do evaluations. We're addressing your point. We did evaluations around whether the trustees thought they got good value, not just from the process of bringing in new trustees, but whenever we brought in consultants, we did a review so that people were at liberty on the board. Because of course there were skeptics on the board who would say, is this wise use of our money, and should we spend it on this or that? I thought someone asked this question, and whilst I was listening to somebody a bit earlier, I looked back at my notes. I think we spent 2% of our turnover each year for the past 3 years on change, which amounts to around about 6.5 million, a couple of 100,000 a year. And when I came to the organisation, they had a pot that was called development, and in the reserves had been put 1.2 million. And I'm quite proud of the fact that we haven't spent the 1.2 million. It was designed to last. When I came, they said it was a 5-year strategy, and it will end up lasting 8 or 9 years in total if we were to spend that money in a similar way. So we have spent money. There's no question we spent money, and certainly 1 or 2 trustees were very, very sceptical about using anybody outside for anything. And what are we paying you for then? There was a sense, which wasn't quite said like that, but there was a sort of that bit around. But gradually people started to be able to feed back and say whether they thought it had given value, not just financially, and then they started seeing the business as usual. Were we actually reducing our cost base and growing our income? And people started to get into the numbers and looking at proper evaluation. I think impact generally is a problem for most charities. And in fact, I've been sitting with Cass and one of the education publishers who are also doing stuff in schools around impact, looking at ways in which for the future we can assess, does it really make what we do make a difference? We've got some stuff around it. We've got some independent reports around it, research around it, but actually you have to keep calibrating that again and again. And so they're good questions.
I think I can't think of a number of organisations that wouldn't exist today if they hadn't brought in that extra resource at the required time.
The Russell process as well kind of weeds people out, doesn't it? Because with certainly for Russell GMS assignments, when we get a brief from a client, we ask candidates not just to send us their CV, but to send us some kind of summary statement that picks out the 3 or 4 main elements of the job, and then reinforce why they might be right for it. So you, the busy client, can see instantly why John or Jane might be right for this particular assignment. And equally, I've phoned John and Jane before and explained, and they've said, actually, do you know what, I'm not entirely sure I can add any value here, to pick up on something that Julian said, the adding of value. Yeah, if they had nothing else on, they could come along, pick up their 400 or 500 quid a day, and then leave, but it really is, and all brochure speak aside, the interims, a good interim will turn it down if they don't feel that they can actually leave anything tangible for you.
Okay. Just building on Emma, I mean,
Sorry.
interims, they have a brand, you know, we like to work with them repeatedly. You know, they've really got to deliver in every assignment. They're only as good as their last assignment. So it's a tough life, you know, for them. And so they have that credibility and track record. And so our clients prefer for us to put forward, you know, in terms of how to few great assignments. It's not a guarantee of success in the future. It does help. So you say, well, that's tough because when you get your first interim project, so that's a whole other, you know, conversation. It's tough to get in and establish, yourself.
Stephen, and then
Yeah, just wanted to add as a footnote to that, because it is a really good question. I think there's two words I don't think I've heard this morning, which is skill transfer. Forgive me if it wasn't what you said, Jason, but there was a lot in what you said. It's all closely packed. But I think in at least 90% of our assignments, when the interim goes, they have left behind some learning. Maybe dotted about in odd places. Sometimes it's an FD who has taught a chief accountant to step up and work in a much more productive and creative way with an FD, because perhaps they've never worked with a good FD before. Sometimes it's about being a paradigm of good behaviour in the senior management team or the board. So somebody who has been on the SMT for a while says afterwards, it was extraordinary the way Jill came in, and that trustee, that honorary treasurer, was always awkward. She just charmed him, and she charmed him professionally. I mean, not charm, and
You're not that kind of agency.
a good chief executive and a good chairman spots that going on and capitalises on it because that's free learning.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And the informal meetings, whether it's tea time, dinner, breakfast meetings, whatever it is, where you have a relatively loose agenda, that's when you do that, and you're able to say to somebody, did you see the way John handled that?
I was just thinking of a particular story of one of the trustees that you helped us initially recruit, who is still with the board, on the board. And interestingly, recently the chair said to me, I find this person's behaviour sometimes is excellent, excellent, totally committed, but occasionally too direct, perhaps. So sometimes can be perceived as being rude. I think it's just he's used to a particular culture in business. And I said, I had an idea which was, why don't you make him the chair of the subcommittee? Because that way he'll have to think about how he's going to manage all of that stuff. And that's worked really well. So sometimes you have to calibrate things. We did have somebody come in not so long ago on IT. We looked for somebody to come in with specialist skills. And we appointed somebody on a 3-month contract. But the deal was that we would look after a month and see if it was going to work. Because it's very hard sometimes in small organisations to know whether that kind of specialist knowledge is going to kind of be adaptable. And it didn't. And we said actually after 3 weeks, we said, it's not going to work. So we're not going to keep you. So I think you have to be brave if you're going to do different things and think it through. But there are tremendous benefits, transferable skills, where people start to learn new things, new processes in particular within the organisation itself. We found process development been very, very, very important.
I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, interims are just human beings like the rest of us. Don't a couple of points. Don't just, culture is always the key. For us the easy bit are the hard skills, the hard of it is the culture. But don't just necessarily choose the interim that fit in best to your existing culture. You know, when we've gone into the harder brief with clients, often we brought someone in that runs not a totally adjunct to the culture, but someone really kind of change things a bit and really challenge and really maybe say, be quite forceful and say no and push. And you know, especially on the commercial side, the fundraising side, someone really think differently. They might have to yield a big axe and be quite tough. You know, and not always, you know, those consistent and popular. And it's those Stephen's points are a really good one. I mentioned the exit, you know, plan. But again, every interim, you know, we all have a boss, you know, somewhere along the line. And it's that don't just think that they're superhuman. I mean, I think they are, but you know, they are human. They need some time sitting down, take them through the normal induction program for the organisation. If that means they're not you know, slamming through the change for a few days, or so be it. Put them through a few days of the induction. Send them on some site visits. Do what you would do with a normal executive joining. You know, make sure that